out some 1/4" throwaway plywood here. I've got it marked out. I'm gonna cut a pattern for this thing, something that's lighter to handle, so I can test my piece here. And this is where I'm gonna add on the little bump out for the stop there. And I'm just gonna cut what I kind of think will work and then adjust it to suit. And whenever I get it right, then I'll use that to make my little piece that I'll be welding on there. Got to carry this keel out to my other shop where I do my welding. So I've just got it strapped to a dolly here. I can carry it across the yard. Like I said, it's about 170 pounds, so it's a little bit on the heavy side to, just try to manhandle, but this should get it across the yard okay. Preheating this cast iron before I weld it. Trying to get it somewhere around 400 or 500 degrees. That little torch may not do it, but it should hopefully get it warm enough. I'm out of oxygen from a big torch. Anyway, I did clean the surfaces where I'm going to be directly welding with a carbide burr, and I'll finish shaping this after I get it welded on. And I did use a diamond blade, by the way, to cut that and the other piece, so a little bit less contamination than using an abrasive wheel. All right, so I've got the piece just tacked into place. Like I say, this is bigger than it needs to be. I'll cut it down after I get it welded in. I've still got my little torch on it. I'm keeping it warm until I'm completely done, and then I'll cool it off real slowly to help it not hopefully crack. But what I'm getting ready to do now is just take my carbide burr and open up a groove right there down roughly 1/3 of the way through the metal. Anyway, where I can get a deep root weld down in there. Again, remembering that the surface has to end up ultimately being flush, so I can't have build-up weld on the outside. It's got to be welded from the middle out, so to speak, to get a good strong weld. Okay, I've started cutting a groove in it here, and again, I'm using a solid carbide burr to cut that, so it's actually cutting it rather than grinding it, and that keeps contaminants out of it. If you use a grinding wheel or a cutoff wheel or something like that, it leaves a lot of contaminants behind that you have to deal with. So, and that will give me nice clean metal, and I'm fixing to weld that side right away, because cast iron will start rusting just really quickly. It starts rusting, so you got to do what you're going to do with it really quick once you get it clean. You can't wave around. And you'll notice I still got the little torch on it. I've still got it hot, and I will leave that torch on it even after I weld it, and then just move the torch further away and let it kind of cool down really, really slowly. And there's that side welded. I will have to grind it flush because it is a little bit proud of the surface, but that's okay. That's good. I can always cut a little bit of it off with the grinder, now that it's welded. I've got to flip it, weld the other side, and then I got to build up in my radius corners a little bit, and then I'll finish shaping everything. There's the other side ground out, ready to weld. And there's that side welded. Now I've just got to build in this radius right here on this top. This is the top side. Got to fill that in just a little bit and double check back in here. This will have to be kind of rounded out where right in that corner right there is where it rests on that stop. I use a carbide scraper, and I can scrape the majority of the bottom paint off of this thing before I even start sanding. That saves a whole lot of work. I'm grinding and sanding on this cast iron centerboard. Well, a previous owner had already restored this centerboard at some point in time, as far as filling in all the little pock marks and the little rusted out divots or whatever in this thing, and it looked like it was done with epoxy. So I didn't dig all that out, but I did sand it all back down, or grind it all back down to bare shiny metal, and just leveled it back out with that filler that was already there. I had to add a little bit of filler around the edges, just a little bit where the edge was rusty. Got all that cleaned up, real good, shiny metal, and cleaned it really good multiple times with acetone just to get rid of any of the metal dust or rust or anything like that was on it, and got it nice and shiny. And then immediately after cleaning it, put epoxy barrier coat on it. So the whole thing now has been covered with epoxy, with the barrier coat epoxy. And I have also just got through washing it down with some Dawn dishwashing detergent and hot water. So it's all been scrubbed down really good with the hot or warm soapy water. And so the next step is to lightly sand it and clean it again, and then put some bottom paint on it. So it's actually not too bad a shape. It does have the typical pitting, that you get on cast iron after it starts rusting, but it's not terrible. And the fact that somebody else had already done all that prep work was a good thing. So, and I did, weld that piece back on right there that had broken off, that was gone. I just scavenged a piece of scrap cast iron and cut a chunk out and grooved it out and all, and welded that back in. So bottom paint, and then ready to go back in the boat. Then there's the first coat of bottom paint on this centerboard. I should be able to get a second coat on it later this afternoon. Second coat, bottom paint. So I'll let that dry for a couple more hours. Right about dark, I'll come out here and put it back in my cradle thing here where I can close my overhead door. I've got the pennant dropped through and retied, and I took and cut the core out for a few inches, and then just tied, I don't know what it's called, I call it a halyard knot, that is real flat because I took the core out, so I've got a real flat knot there, because the knot's got to be at least as thin as the swing keel there, centerboard. So tying it like that, I've still got core going through and around the shackle, but then once it gets past the shackle, it goes back into that flat, just the outer braid, to tie the knot. And that makes it nice and flat, nice and thin in this direction here, where it'll hopefully slide up and down through there without binding. I just used a coat hanger, straightened out and run down through the trunk there to grab my pennant line, pull it up, and now I've got the back end of it lifted with that pennant. Used my chains to drop the boat to keep from having to pick up the centerboard so far. I've got the chain hole still connected, and I'm fixing to put the jack stands back under it snug, and then I'll finish. And I've got a measurement from the bottom of here to the center of the hole, and I'm going to take my trouble light here and I'm going to put it on the other side and let it shine back this way through the hole, and that will help me align the holes. Okay, I've got the boat resting firmly on 4 jack stands now, as well as the chain straps, the lifting straps, as well as, you know, hard blocking here and here. And I've got a light on the other side shining back this way so I can tell when the hole lines up. And I think what I need to probably do is maybe go in the boat and lift up on the pennant some more to get a flatter angle here. I am right there at it. I can see light kind of coming through and a little bit of a angle through the hole, so I'm right there at it, but I'm just not quite lined up, and the angle is just getting to where it's difficult to lift. So I do believe if I lift that pennant a few inches, it'll make it a lot easier to put the final pin in. Okay, real close. Okay, I just put a Phillips screwdriver through it to get it in the hole. So now I can take this thing here out of the way. Having the light shining through from the other side really helps locate that hole. Put that there to give something to fall on in case something happens. Keep from hitting the floor. And all the dust marks on my fresh new bottom paint is just from my dirty hands on this dirty concrete floor. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use a little bit larger pin and put it in from the other side and displace that screwdriver that I put in there temporarily, because the screwdriver's smaller. This is a little bit bigger, but not quite the size of the finished pin. So I'll put this in from the other side and knock that screwdriver out, and then that gets it closer to the, the final size pin. And then I will put the permanent pin in from this side back that way and knock this rod out. And whenever I put this final pin in, I will set it in 5200 on the two ends. I'll drive it in all but about an inch. And then I'll squirt some 5200 in the hole on the other side, and then put some 5200 around the pin on this side, and then finish driving it home. And it'll end up being flush on both sides, or just shy of flush on both sides. And it'll have that 5200 around it to kind of bed it, to keep it from ever, potentially, vibrating out or anything like that. Although it is a drive-in friction fit, so it shouldn't be an issue either way. Okay, now for the last steps, and I do have the end of this pin tapered just a little bit on the end, so it'll help it line up better, hopefully. I've got the weight kind of carried on the block here so that the pin stays centered, and so I'm going to knock that temporary pin out and put the permanent one in. Okay, so that should be far enough to start putting caulking on it, I think. Now I am using a stainless pin here, and I'll be replacing the back one here too. But remember that the pivot hole in that centerboard has been bored out, and there's a nylon or Delrin bushing about an inch diameter with the hole drilled through the center of that, so this stainless pin does not come directly in contact with that cast iron, so hopefully I won't have an issue with corrosion around that pin, being that thing's been bored out. The old pin, which is this pin, was mild steel, but it's completely pitted, and I don't know, you probably can't see it, but there's deep pits in it, and it was pretty corroded. I've had this in the freezer because it's a partial tube here, but this is fast setting 3M5200, and I'm just smearing it all over this pin here so that when it drives in that last little bit, it will be hopefully kind of somewhat captured a little better than just friction fit. Now I'm going to go to the other side and put some in the hole so that when it knocks through, it'll seal the other side. Now this has nothing to do with, you know, water getting in there. This is just to keep the pin from vibrating out. Okay, I can go look at the other side. That's going to be recessed about maybe a 1/16 of an inch on both sides, just enough so I can cover it with that 5200. I've already raised and lowered that centerboard a couple times with the pennant, just to make sure everything was swinging clear with this thing and not sticking anywhere. And it appears that it's good. Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone, let that cure. We'll be putting bottom paint on it too. All right, so it's in permanent till next time, I guess. Got the pins set in 5200. I've already lifted it up and down a couple times to assure that everything is working as it's supposed to. Okay, so that's hanging on the pennant right there. No nicks in my epoxy anywhere. And just for a little added safety, I do have the centerboard supported here on some blocking and a wedge to, just shim it up to keep the weight from just being suspended from the pennant while I'm under here working. So that's solid blocking for the boat, and then blocking for the centerboard. And then I've now got 4 jack stands back under it, nice and secure and chained. And I've still got my straps up there too, just barely snug, so that if anything slips or moves, the overhead I-beam and chains and stuff still carries it.